This is my Valentine, and you're watching Stephen Blocker's channel.
I wish we could go back to the beginning. The time has come. It's for the best, I know it. Who could have guessed that somehow, some way, we'd have to say goodbye? I really hope people know what that's from. I didn't just make that up. I'm not that good of a poet. Saying goodbye is one of the hardest parts of a show. When the credits roll for the last time, and it'll be the last time we actually see the cast. As someone who grew up really attached to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cast, I always wondered where everyone ended up after the series had ended. The show ending was like saying goodbye to an old friend for me. Well, we all know the ending. It's one of the most famous endings in anime history. Atem, the Pharaoh spirit, says goodbye to the group, moving on to the afterlife. And that's it. But what about the other minor characters? The ones unable to return to Dark Side of Dimensions? You know, your Weevil Underwoods and your My Valentines. You may assume that it is up to our imagination, as this is not their story. But you don't have to. The anime actually gives us all the answers and clues that we need. You may not remember this scene if you didn't watch the Japanese version. Well, that's because the dub actually cut it. As you may know, the dub did not reuse the original Japanese versions and credits in any capacity at all, so you get weird cuts like this. Compared to the dub, on the other hand, which has a very, very weak ending, in one of the most tragic cuts I've ever seen in any dub, it goes straight to black after a self-referential joke about friendship speeches. That is not how I want to say goodbye to these guys. That's not even a climax, that's just a, alright, we're done, go home now. The Japanese version replaces the traditional credits with an epilogue, a much more thoughtful climax with actual closure, giving us a glimpse to where multiple characters, even filler original ones, ended up going once the series ended. So right now, we're going to go through this epilogue together and theorize where everyone ended up after the curtain call. The main friend group of Yugi and his gang returned home to Japan from Egypt. Kaiba and Mokuba are still rich and still have the Blue Eyes White Dragon jet. Duke and Tristan seem to have not changed much at all, as they still pine for serenity and are more pathetic than Steve Urkel acting with Laura. Believe it or not, this is the only character trait Tristan has in Duel Monsters. As I pointed out before, Tristan is only a main character by proximity of being in the friend group. The only real relevance he ever has in the story is getting his body stolen. Yet, believe it or not, that actually happens twice. One in filler and one in canon, so if I had to guess, Tristan probably ends up like that guy in high school who, even 20 years later, still acts like he's a teenager. You know, the guy who never really grew up. Speaking of Joey's sister Serenity, she's shown wearing a sailor uniform, meaning she's likely going to start high school soon. So she's maturing, which is really nice to see. Her eye surgery has been a success, and now she's becoming her own person and not just the person Joey has to protect. Rebecca Hawkins and her grandfather, Arthur, greet them at the airport, and Rebecca still has a thing for Yugi, which makes Taya jealous. Sorry, Rebecca, but every anime fan knows that filler girls don't get the guy. Tell that to Krillin's girlfriend Marin, who looks suspiciously like Bulma. Better get Dr. Phil on that right there. But that's really it for the main cast. This epilogue mostly focuses on the minor characters more than anything. So, let's see where these smaller time characters ended up. Well, Weevil and Rex instantly bicker upon seeing one another. Their temporary alliance in the Doma arc seems to have meant nothing. I feel like these guys just never grew up. Remember, in this universe, the dueling card game is about as popular as most sports. So I think Weevil and Rex are pretty much the equivalent of the stereotypical star quarterback who peaked in high school. Now this is a timeline I wouldn't mind living in. Someone with Weevil's physique, a guy who's short and scrawny and wears glasses, but is on the social ladder level of a high-tier athlete. Remember the von Schroeder siblings? The child prodigy who were one step behind Kaiba in the technology race? They were the antagonists of the Grand Prix arc. Mostly out of resentment because Kaiba was always much more successful and advanced than them. They're shown to be in a meeting with Maximilian Pegasus. They're probably pitching an idea to him. Well, it looks like he decided to fund their idea, whatever it was. Is this basically the anime version of Shark Tank? I will assume it must be a game, since Pegasus seems to be funding starter games, like he did with Duke Devlin and Dungeon Dice Monsters. So, they all get a happy ending, as Pegasus is still rich, while the Von Schroeders get to live the life of Ted DiBiase. So definitely another happy ending. Even Mako Tsunami, the fish duelist, gets a happy ending, as he seems to have finally obtained his boat, his dream to honor his father's legacy, and he seems to have made friends with Esperoba. But the only thing they had in common was losing to Joey in this tournament, and having their duel end with more of a respect, graceful loser type of ending, rather than being sore losers. Although considering they both had locator cards at the end of their duels, they may have crossed paths in the tournament afterwards. Or maybe Esperoba is the person who Mako Tsunami got his locator cards from, because Esperoba still had a locator card after losing to Joey, and Mako Tsunami is shown to have 4 much later when Joey duels him. Fun fact, this 5-second shot is enough to yaoi ship these two characters. For reasons. The anime fandom, ladies and gentlemen, love it or hate it. And then finally, we have My Valentine paired up with the only female duelist left. She's formed a tag team with Vivian Wong, the girl with the Chun-Li like pigtails who had an obsessive crush on Yugi. Wow, Yugi, what a player. That's 3 goals after you, putting us other short kings to shame. So as for why these two are together, I think Mai decided to form a team with someone, and Vivian seemed like a good choice. Maybe there's a tag team tournament, or she just needed a friend. I mean, to those of you familiar with wrestling, when someone is on a losing streak, they usually try to find a partner and go for the tag titles. Who knows? Maybe there is some kind of tag team tournament because they're facing the Paradox Brothers, who are tag team specialists. That's pretty cool, actually. I guess her and Joey never got together. So that means there's still a chance for me and her, right? I guess they didn't know what else to do with her, so they just paired her up with the last female duelist in the series. At least she's back in Dueling, and not her old bitter self, or the villain she played in the Doma arc. And hey, maybe she's making real friends finally, and not being a loner anymore either. There wasn't really much left they could do with her, because if you remember My Valentine, they explored a lot with her character in the filler arcs. I mean, the only other thing they could have done in this epilogue was maybe put her with Joey, but I assume maybe they just wanted to leave that open for a reason I'll get to later. Overall, this was very, very nice. I liked it a lot since so many of these characters are well loved and we get to see one last shot of them, especially the ones who don't get to return for the Dark Side of Dimensions movie from 2017. In fact, it even focused very heavily on more minor characters than the main cast. All is well, and everyone seemed to make it out okay. Well, aside from, you know, the ones who've been sent to the Shadow Realm, so to speak. And with that, Yugi and the group just resume a normal life. And then in his last moments, Yugi says, "This isn't the tale of a great pharaoh. Everyone has his own story. This story may be ending, but my story is just beginning." Setting him up for his new life without a Tem, just as a boy on his own. You know, it's pretty funny though. Imagine going through all this effort to save the world, only to have to go to school the next day. Not gonna lie, this is a very touching and emotional ending. And seeing this does make me emotional because, I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always been one of my comfort shows. So saying goodbye to the cast was not easy. So I'm just gonna say it. Goodbye, old friend. Also, I pose a question. Could this epilogue have theoretically been setting up for a sequel? Sure, the manga had ended, but the demand for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Was very, very high. What if they were considering going the more traditional sequel route? You know, like a Dragon Ball GT. Maybe that's why some of this seems so arbitrary and random. These relationships would have been expanded on in the sequel. How could it have gone? Yugi's last line about his story continuing seems to imply this as well. That the Pharaoh's gone, but there's still more of a journey left. That his story is just beginning. Although there's also the chance it could have just been a standard anime optimism ending. Since most anime do tend to try to end on a more very open and optimistic for the future ending. You know, with the implication being that the cast's lives will go on, even if we can't see it. I could be totally wrong though. I likely am, but you never know. I mean, I know what I'd want at least. Next time, as mentioned earlier, I'll be covering all the characters who were not covered here. Mostly the ones who were, to put it nicely, shadow realmed. Nothing bad happened to them, they're just in another dimension. Don't worry about them, they'll be fine.